Welcome. I'm Annie Carlano. I'm the Senior Curator of Craft, Design, and Fashion here at the Mint Museum, and I am delighted to welcome you to Wednesday Night Live on behalf of Todd Herman, the President and CEO of the Mint Museum, the staff of the museum, and Wednesday Night Live. Thank you to Bank of America for underwriting the Wednesday Night Live series. Every Wednesday, museums on the Levine Avenue of the Arts are open late and free and feature innovative, engaging programming with an outside cultural partner. Each museum owns a different Wednesday of the month. The Mint is first Wednesday, and the Beckler is the second. And the Gantt is the last Wednesday. So thank you for being here tonight, and thank you again to Bank of America. I am over the moon to introduce tonight's program. You are all in for a treat. We are having a conversation with Cortney and Robert Novogratz on the occasion of their new book, the first stop on the book tour here in Charlotte, North Carolina, because as you will learn, Charlotte has a place in their hearts, a very special place in their hearts. You may know them from their 2 TV shows on Bravo and HGTV, from their many publications, from their many designs that you've seen, product design. They are the champions of do-it-yourself, interior design, building, an aesthetic that is really unique and now being sought after in Europe. And the conversation tonight will be led by Holly Phillips, who many of you know. She is a leading interior designer here in Charlotte, and her company, The English Room, is a specialist in a kind of traditional, innovative, again, a very unique aesthetic. And it's a conversation among friends. So I think we're going to have a really interesting talk tonight, and I thank you. And I also want to tell everyone that at the conclusion of the conversation, there will be a book signing in the museum store, and there will be wine, and you'll be able to get a copy, I don't want to give it back, but of the new Novogratz Chronicles, which features 25 years, it's hard to imagine, of their incredible designs. So thank you, Cortney and Robert, for choosing Charlotte for your first stop on the book tour, and thank you, Holly. Thank you. Thank you.
I don't read, and I read the whole book, so that says a lot. I loved how it's laid out. I love how it's kind of beginning to end. But I think people should know how you met and where you met. You want to go?
I'll start. So in 1986, I moved to Charlotte. I graduated from college, and as a counselor said, move to Charlotte. You can get a job there, And my parents were living in Europe at the time, and I had never heard of Charlotte. And I grew up in Virginia, believe it or not. And for like a day, I thought I was in Charlotte, South Carolina. But and when I got here, I was walking around beautiful Myers Park today. I was on a different part of Charlotte. And I was like, this is nice. And then like two weeks later, I came over around here. I was like, oh my God, this place is beautiful. But Charlotte back then, you had NASCAR was just getting really big. You had Jim and Penn. You had pro wrestling, which I was a fan of. And Courtney was asking about it earlier tonight. I fell in love with Charlotte like within a week. By far, probably my favorite people I ever met was in Charlotte. Growing up in Northern Virginia, I was really, I wasn't the South, but I was in Alexandria, Virginians. But such a warm group of people. Met lifelong friends, got a great job, bought my first house here, And if I hadn't met this one, I probably would have lived here the rest of my life. So, and my kids have a couple visited here, and I tell them it's some of the best years of my life. So I just fell in love with Charlotte. So, long story short, Cortney had a sister named Brandy, who my friend Adam Landau was with me when we met Cortney, who knew us. But she was more, went to Sweetbriar College, was more, I don't know, just different. Great. Not as wild as Cortney, but they invited me to this great party one night because I was known to make a good party tape. That's how I got into this party. And I met Cortney at the party, and she came up to me, and I'm 8 years older. She came up to me very confident, and she said, "I'm moving to New York City. I'm going to be a model or an actress." And I said, "Well, you know, you're not that tall, so you should probably be an actress." And she said, "Well, if I was taller, I'd be a supermodel, and I wouldn't be standing here talking to you." And that's a true story, and that's how we met. And we dated for a year, long distance, and we moved back to New York City. But I have amazing memories of Charlotte. And I was bringing up Adam Landau. I'd like to thank Adam and his wife Shelley, who kind of put all this together tonight, who are dear friends of mine. Thank you.
It's a good story.
And I'm sorry I took him out of Charlotte.
No, what would you have renovated here?
Well, he had already done his house. He already had good taste, so it was time to do more.
Well, in the book, each chapter kind of talks about their houses and how it evolves from house to house, but what was your background and how, let's start the first Chelsea house, how'd you get there?
Well, we fell in love that day, and you know, kind of ran off for 3 days and talked about our lives together. We had a love of family, we wanted a lot of children, and we loved design. Even though at that time, Robert shared he was a stockbroker, and I was just graduating from college. We knew that we had the same passions and the same desires. And so we found ourselves moving to New York, got our first apartments kind of separately. But you know, it's an expensive city, and so I was doing some acting classes, and he was working in Wall Street. But we started throwing parties, and we'd bring up bands from the South, and we literally started charging people. We would pass out flyers, and that's how we kind of were able to pay the bills, basically, and go out to like an expensive dinner and things like that. And we were not just throwing an average party, we were decorating them. You know, if it was a Mardi Gras party, not only would we bring up Southern bands, we'd get the beats and we'd do the whole thing. And so we also had shared with you, Holly, if we were the couple that came over to your apartment, we would drink some wine and we'd start rearranging your furniture. And so we were finding our love of design by just finding ourselves and finding the city. And so we got engaged and decided we would get married at my parents' house in Georgia, where I'm from. And we wanted to build a house, you know, build a life where we're going to have all these kids right in the middle of New York City. And we, of course, couldn't afford the very first apartment. We would go with a broker, they would say, you know, there's maintenance fees, and then you have to pay the doorman, and then you have to get passed by a board. And so it just seemed so overwhelming to us. But we knew that if we could just find our own building, we could throw parties in it, we could have a lot of kids in it, we could, you know, do life on our terms. And so we walked the streets and we were willing to go anywhere. We went up to Harlem, all the way downtown, and we found a condemned brownstone in Chelsea. And we basically bought that house. We had no money to renovate. The owner that sold it to us, you want to tell him how we did that, or should we leave it for the book?
Yeah, it's a little technical, but the owner was very good to us. He gave us a loan, which they call taking paper, and we could not afford it. But we were very, very, very fearless and very, very ignorant, and we've always kind of walked that line, you know. And that's a beauty of youth sometime, and maybe as we get older, we should still hold that in. But and we got lucky because we had a lot of wonderful people that guided us and helped us, and we all need help.
I would say we knew exactly what we were doing, and we had no clue what we were doing. And those two things can exist in the same time. And we will always be like that. You know, we always will challenge ourselves. And so we bought this condemned building. There was no running water, there was fire damage, there were holes in the walls. And this was
That
again,
picture right there, I was 24 years old. I was writing that book, 25, I'm like, she was 25 years old running a job site in New York City. So again, we were like kind of fearless and stupid at the same time. And it was a fun time in our life.
and so what we did was, similar to throwing those parties, we started hiring people like his brother, who had just, Robert's from 7 kids, I'm from 5. His younger brother had just graduated from college. We were like, you want to help us? We'll pay you in beer. And so he moved up, and we literally demoed the whole house. But what we did start doing is leaning on people smarter than us. And so we had a friend that graduated as an architect, like your daughter. And we hired him to kind of come, or didn't hire him, but say, can you stop by the house? And he said, it seems sound enough. And we were like, great, let's keep moving forward. But we just relied on all of the other people to kind of educate us, to lean on. But we ultimately knew, again, what we were doing. We had the vision. We didn't know how to actually get there. But I think the biggest thing and the biggest lesson for all of us, no matter what age we are, is to just take that first step, to just start.
How long was that first renovation? And did you have children yet?
Well, interesting because we've done this. Actually, it's 25 years in the book, but it was actually 29 years, but 25 years sounds better. So it's 20. But 29 years ago, there was no internet. There was no cell phones. We had to use a payphone at the door. It was yellow pages. So a lot of ways, much harder, right? But a lot of ways easier because there wasn't as much red tape. There wasn't the litigious world we live in today. So there was a freedom of being kind of a rock star in that way. But now everything's at our fingers and everything's so easy. But in a lot of ways, I'm not sure any of us are happier than we are back then. And there was a real freedom to that. So we went fast, and we also didn't have a lot of money. And the contractors and everyone else kind of knew we were clueless and didn't have a lot of money. And there's also there's something wonderful about that.
Yeah, and so to answer your question, we were planning our wedding and renovating this house. So we didn't have children yet, but as far as creative, I'm a visual person. I mean, we're creatives naturally. That's kind of how we found each other. And so everything just blended together. I don't know if for you guys out there, we thrive with a lot on our plate. And so our wedding kind of gave us the inspiration for the design of the house. And the design of the house gave us the inspiration for the wedding. And so it all was blending together. And again, we had a purpose, which all of us need in life, right? No matter our age. We had a vision, and it was just literally telling a story. We're going to get through the beginning, middle, and end. We don't know how it's going to play out.
So basically 9 months.
So you're in it.
Yeah, and we also didn't have a lot of money, so time was money.
And were you still working as a stockbroker?
Yeah, I was.
Okay.
Yeah, and but when you're making all the decisions, sometimes you can do things a lot faster.
Right. And you were basically playing general contractor
So I
and
became
like boots on the ground.
So
Talk
quit.
about your cement guy.
Yeah, so I quit my waitress jobs, quit auditioning, and I became a full-time contractor. And so we found
So Cortney, at the time, John Gotti was the biggest mobster in New York City, and so she got our cement guy, Gotti, from the family, and she's getting this guy like fighting in his face, and this guy's very abrasive and a lot of curse words. And Cortney's like cursing him out. And I'm like,
he didn't finish the job.
but I'm like, I was like, you're going to end up in the cement,
He was like, this is not South Georgia. You could end up in the cement. And I was like, you think he really killed me?
We encountered a lot because when we were, after that Chelsea, we went to Soho, which the mob was still there, and we dealt with a lot, and we were almost like, I was like, am I living in like The Godfather right now? But we were again just kind of fearless and just, I think like to the young people here, like if you look at musicians or movie directors, most of them do the best work when they're young, and the best songwriting, the best art, and there's something about that, I think. And I think with us, I'm not saying that was our best work, but it was our most honest work and our most liberating work. And there's something really free about that.
I'll tell you one quick story just to put things in perspective, because my childhood was in South Georgia. And we basically saved up money. We got all the debris that was inside of the house because we had to demo the house. And we knew we had to order a container that cost a lot of money to us to take all the debris out and put it in the container on the street in New York City. So we ordered the container, it's dropped off at the end of that day, and we were going to come back the next morning and put everything into it. We show up, the whole container was filled because New York City put everything in it, the TVs, the mattresses, all their, and we're sitting there going, all our neighbors just filled our container, we're the ones paying for it. So it was a lesson in welcome to New York City. Yeah.
So then did you have to spend the night guarding your container?
So we learned to never leave a container again. And
Canvas over there.
But there's then you learn things like side hustles, like somebody's slipping $20 here and there. It's a dirty business,
Yeah. Construction's hard.
Yeah.
What has been your biggest challenge, or which house so the book goes through all the houses and they're so amazing. But which one has been your biggest challenge?
Probably there's a few years we tried LA for a while, and so we moved with all 7 of our kids to LA, and that second house we did out in LA was the hardest because we, for the first time, weren't on the same page, which happens in a marriage if you've been in a long marriage or even short marriage or a partnership. We kind of lost our way where it wasn't because we lost our way, but I do think because of that, everything just kept falling apart, and so that was the hardest house, where we had problems, the whole house ended up being torn down, time is money.
Didn't they tear that down while you were in New York?
Yes.
And it was only supposed to be partially torn down and you came back and it was gone?
Yes, and so basically we took our eye off the ball because we were dealing with other things, and when we're the best is when we are on the same page and we're wearing all the hats and we're in it for the same reasons and we're designing for ourselves. So you're designing with the love in your heart and with the vision.
Our 2 mistakes we were building this huge house in what they call the bird streets in LA. In LA, there's like hillside stuff, so it's construction-wise, and you have to deal with that. And then we bought this big townhouse in the middle of Greenwich Village, and then we moved, and then we took our eye off the ball. And then we had COVID hit, we had supply chain hit, we had the New York City house was landmarks, which I would tell anyone to steer away from landmark buildings. We had a litigious neighbor. I mean, like everything went wrong. But our biggest mistake was these were super, super high-end buildings, and they came out amazing. I mean, the best blocks in Manhattan and LA. We're really good at what we do, but that's not what we really made what we did better was more of a cooler, artistic, vibe, and a cool, very, high-end houses, but not and I feel like when we first moved to Manhattan, I always just say, there's always someone smarter than you, always someone better looking than you, always someone richer than you, just be you. And I feel like we got away from what we were really, really good at. And then when you get to the highest echelon, it's a different buyer, different everything else, and it's not as fun. And I think that was one of many mistakes we made. And sometimes luck's on your side, and sometimes it's not. And sometimes things are harder, sometimes they're not. But I feel we got a little way of what we were good at.
And there were hardships, like COVID hit. We've built through 9/11. We were building a house from the ground up during 9/11. So, no, that was down on Canal Street, like 5 blocks from where the trade centers. We witnessed everything. So, all of us have gone through hardships, and like thinking of everybody here, hopefully with the hurricane. And I apologize for not starting off with that. And hopefully everyone's okay and your family members. But so we've gone through hardships, to Robert's point. COVID definitely was another hardship that we all encountered. We happened to have so much on our plate because we were off the same page. We took off more than we could really handle. And we were also building kind of for someone else other than for ourselves. And that's where we lost our way.
You said that in the book. I found that really interesting. Your best design is always come when you design the house for yourselves.
even though we know we're house flippers.
Right.
But it's when you have to know, at least this is my thoughts, you have to know a reason you're doing something. When it's a hard mountain you're going to climb, you have to know why you want to climb it, because that's how you're going to get to the top. And with this particular house in LA and the one in New York, we lost our ways, even though we set everything up thinking everything's going to be great. The reality is, we still went through hardships during building in 9/11 and all of that. So we could get through building in COVID, but we had lost our way. That's how I put it.
How do you know when it's time? Is it someone makes an offer? Do you say, okay, we're going to stay here for a year and list it? How do you do that? And then are you preloading your next project?
Our LA, which they call that, we did this old castle up in the Hollywood Hills, and out of nowhere, this woman offered us like 25% more than ask if we could move out in a week.
2 weeks.
2 weeks, and Courtney's like, hell no. I'm like, hell yeah, we're moving.
You forgot to tell me we were in the middle of throwing a party, a wedding for 150 people.
So,
You had to remind me how hard it is to make that amount of money. I was like, let's
it was
pack.
my favorite house, but it was, anyway. But, so you never really know, but,
And sometimes we, because we carried a house when like Lehman Brothers went under and the world was crashing, we're like, sometimes we sell too soon, and sometimes we can't sell fast enough. So we it's really just a journey. We bought 4 houses on one street. We can't live in all of them, so we pre-sold 3 of them. It's a song and a dance. And again, out of our 7 kids, we have one daughter that may never move again, and one daughter that will never stay put because she's used to moving. So they all kind of understand what we do now.
Do they all have different favorite houses?
I think so, wouldn't you say? I can't speak for them, but I do.
I remember the basketball court, you need to go back and watch the show, but you can find it online.
9 by Design, yeah.
Yeah, the basketball court for the boys was so cool, the inside,
Yeah.
and then there was another one that was on the rooftop.
Well, this is the one thing, you guys in Charlotte, we walked to his old house today. I'm a visual person, so everything is stimulated from these purple ombre, seating going all the way up. Everything is around us if we just open our eyes. And so for us, we kept adding all these kids and having all of our close friends move to the suburbs, and we were like, no, we want to live right in the middle of Manhattan. If you're going to live in it, you might as well live right in the middle of it. So how do we bring kind of suburbia to our children? And so I was going to all these different schools and seeing, oh, they have the playground on the roof. Oh, they've done this. And so I was like, well, why couldn't we do that for a home? And so that's how we got the idea to do a basketball court on top of our townhouse. It made sense. We just enclosed it, and that became our backyard. That became our kids' childhood. And so it's just seeing something and flipping it upside down and thinking of it in a different way.
Are y'all still buying and flipping? Are you in this pink house? Is it forever?
Well, it had to be turned kind of an ochre color.
Right, I read that part.
the pink house is a huge house in Greenwich Village. I have a thing on my Instagram page that says, I've been lucky and blessed, but my life is not nearly as good as this Instagram page would indicate. And the house is really big, so I walk people through it, and I'm like, it's a great house, but we're not, as successful as this house would indicate. So
we will be selling it and moving on.
But I think we want to, houses, we probably live differently than most, but the castle house, there were 2 or 3 others.
The castle was from the 1920s and a terrific-looking house.
And we have a very, humble home in New England that is small for all of us. And that's kind of the house with all the memories. We'll never sell the house.
That was the first trampoline in ground I think I'd ever seen. I thought that was the coolest.
But we saw that somewhere, and we're like, why can't we do it? And our contractor was like, well, I don't know how to do it. And I was like, we're going to learn how to do it. Let's just figure it out. So again, having 5 boys, we thought we were making it safe, and it's also visually prettier. They hosed it down and made it like a slip and slide. So.
On the ground either way.
Yeah.
I would say though, because we did move a lot. My dad was a West Pointer in the military. We moved a lot, and I thought, the kids have had a lot of interesting siblings and cool things and all that. And I was like, this is great, but we have regrets and we made mistakes. And it's in the book. And I think we did move too many times. And I think, I was telling someone earlier, you know, quote, so what would you say to your 30-year-old self? Because I'm all private school, and so my 30-year-old self is public school. One, for the finance, obvious finance. But two, because I was a kid in public school, and because I feel like if you get the right school system, more kids get more of a solid background. So we made mistakes, and we put that in the book. And, you know, just because I was a military brat, we moved around, and we were a little tougher, it's hard for these kids in this generation growing up. It's a different generation than we were. And so we always try to make the houses fun and interesting people. Cordy and I were always there with the kids, but we will never get advice on parenting because we always say, well,
We're still in the thick of it.
you know, but we, you know, what was amazing to us is a little different, and the world keeps changing. So maybe later in life, and some will opt in. You know, we have 7 children. You know, they're all different, but I think the journey, I mean, was pretty interesting in the long run. I think they'll love it. Yeah, because they're just, at the end of the day, a house is a home and what you create, right? They're just basketball court, and this and that. When we had Bravo, when our first show came out, where they called it Upfronts at NBC, and Andy Cohen was telling us media this, and so this really snarky interviewer person asked me, there's like 800 journalists there, and it's a big deal, and he said, don't get confrontational. So this one was like, you know, hi, how you doing? You know, like really, you know, you move this kids from this to that and this to that. And I said, well, let me tell you something. I moved my kids 8 blocks from Soho to West Village with a basketball court on the roof, and there was one with a basketball court in the house. And I said in the show, if you watched it, you know, my son was a lead basketball player. He had a teammate in LaFrac City, the projects in Queens, you know, kids, like I think 17 people every 2 months were killed. Kid in Bed-Stuy, kid in Harlem. I said, my kids have a pretty good life, you know, so I'm not so worried about moving from a basketball court or 8 blocks over. But it's really the love and the home you create, more so than the actual. And I was one of 7 kids, grew up in suburban Virginia, 1 bathroom. We have it, to us, that was a great life. So it's all how you create it.
Well, and I think too, like, again, obviously we have some adult children, maybe some of you guys do, I know. You know, they're going to find their way. They're going to figure out, you know, their own struggles and their successes and all of that. I mean, we definitely, like anybody, if you have chosen to be a parent, you hear what you did wrong, well, you moved us too fast, or I liked that house, not this one. That was your childhood. Your parents are house flippers, you know, but we were with you guys all the time. You know, one of my best friends is a costume designer. She's on a movie set for 3 months out of the year. That was her child's story, you know, and I think
it teaches resilience.
It does, and maybe they don't know it yet, or they do, you know, except for now.
Well, and one daughter you said is working with you, so she clearly loves that life.
But she's the one that will never probably move again. She's cute. She's like, I may upgrade once more, but that's it, you know.
That's funny.
Yeah.
Tell us a little bit about your licensing and how you got into that and where that's going.
Right, so we were so thrilled that we got an opportunity to do a TV show, and we took that risk, you know, together. And that kind of led us into starting to make product. Our first product design came with CB2, which is part of Crate and Barrel. And we really were designing things that we were seeing. We've always mixed high and low just because it's cool and funkier, but it's also the way we were able to design a life for ourselves. And so we started trying to create product that we were personally needing. And CB2 was incredible. It was a multi-year situation where we collaborated with them. And it was like a crash course of product design. I mean, we learned everything with them. And they learned from us as well and went on to have many other kind of designers and celebrities.
Were you there first?
We were there first. And it was a real great partnership. We still have SKUs with them to this day. And so what Robert and I did with the HGTV show, it took us all over the country. You can't raise 7 kids and like be all over the country, even though it was amazing. You can do anything really hard for a short amount of time. But I found myself holding other people's babies and not my own, and so that wasn't going to work. So we decided we were going to start making this brand and making product. And we still are learning from this day, but that really, CB2 kickstarted that. And then Robert had an idea of let's get all 50 states to buy something Novogratz. And it's a lot harder than you think, you know? It's as hard as that.
South Dakota and Maine were very difficult.
And this was, again, before, like, social media and all of that. And so we had this vintage old map, and we literally had a peg if someone bought a Novogratz product, and that we just rejoiced in it. But what Robert thought of was, we have to build a community. You know, how do we build a community of people buying things online? And this was even before COVID, you know, so we did have a sense, you know, I'd like to say we kind of are pioneers in things where we were house flippers before it even had a name. We started selling furniture. We weren't the only people, but very early on, furniture in a box.
Right.
And we believed that that's where it was going. You know, we had no idea COVID was coming,
Right.
so. But we still are, to this day, trying to tweak to make it better, trying to make sure the product's not damaged, trying to get it in prices that everyone around the country can afford and to have. And it's been rewarding, it's still challenging, but we are great that we took that
And
opportunity.
you're continuing to grow the SKUs and all of that.
Exactly, so we
It's
just,
a hard gig. You know, it's, you know, Martha Stewart's is someone that I always thought is amazing what she does. And you know, she's like 85 and she has a show with Snoop Dogg, you know, like it's a hustle. So, you know, any entrepreneur, if you own a coffee store, or whatever you do, you're hustling, you know. And it's hard because you have to stay out there and the world keeps changing with TikTok and younger. So you have to stay relative and building a brand. It's not for many.
well, if it was easy, everybody would do it.
Yeah, it's not as easy as, and people are like, I'll get a show, and and a lot of times we dealt with some of these A-list stars, they're like, oh, I put my name on something. No, you have to do the work. It's,
And the one thing too, like, for whatever you guys love, if it's design or you have a business, there's been so many times where, you know, we are so fortunate that our one daughter, all of the kids kind of have to work in a sense in it, but she really is on salary and wanted to be with us and wanted to work with us, and we learn from her and she learns from us. But at the end of the day, no one is going to do it but you. If you own your own business, no one's going to do it. So you can take a tired, sick day maybe once, but it's not like, you know, we're waiting for someone to scale us. We're going to have to scale us. And so, you know, that's just the reality. The same way like our very first house was not going to get built unless we can put the team in, and it definitely takes a village. You know, we don't do everything alone, but ultimately it's us that oversee it all and make sure that, you know, if something's not working so well, it's a reflection of us.
Would you ever do a brick and mortar store? Have you done?
We've done pop-ups. We never say never, because we got 7 kids.
we had a store in Abakini, which is Venice Beach, for a year, and we've done others. But I do think, like, what I'm seeing, you know, we're right now brick and mortar, we're in Home Goods, we're one of the brands there. We're a shade store, we have a big brand there, we've been there forever. Brick and mortar, believe it or not, is actually passing online again. So I read that they were done. So the trends are weird, but
That's good to hear, because in Charlotte, we've just lost a few really good design stores, and there's not much left.
Yeah,
it's sad,
I do think it's going to be, well, like Marshall's, Home Goods, you know, TJ Maxx, we sell with them. And those turn over quickly, so those are always going to be there because it's
we're
the
in
discount.
Europe in London called Next, and Europe doesn't have to contend with Amazon. You know, it's not so that's what we go on.
But I do hope that it comes back, because I think what we're talking about is we're going to get tired of shopping online. You
Well, and
know?
everything starts to look the same. And I remember some of your early projects on the TV shows, like that one of the New Jersey hotel was so cool, and you went out and found these things that, you know, at junk shops, literally, like, and repurposed things. It made it so interesting.
Right, because it is, I mean, like, I'll be honest, if we came over to your house, which is filled with color, I've seen photos, which is amazing, it's those little things that make your head turn, that like you have something different because you found it somewhere that we don't all shop.
Well, that particular hotel, we were on the cover of like the biggest hotel magazine, which probably, I don't remember the name of it, but Fountain Blue was the next article, which is, you know, was probably the most expensive hotel in Miami. So that was big, you know, because we did do it affordable. What we did big though there was art, and we're in an art museum right now, and we've always been big on art, and I had in the book we talk about 2 or 3 much smarter people than me a young friend of mine that ran the Whitney Land, it kind of was encyclopedia art, and I'm kind of a sponge for those things, so I just listen and listen, and I look and look, and I feel like art is something that the more you see, the more you get. But I really talk to the guy, the developer, into like, go heavy in art, go heavy in art. And I will find you stuff that is not crazy expensive, but it is not, these guys are going to be big. And I knew what young museums they were in, I knew the homework. And the art in that hotel is probably worth more now than the hotel itself. So,
was that a big
and Carrington, Robert commissioned her to do, it was a coastal hotel.
It doesn't always happen, but we really believe in art, and we still believe in art. And art now is getting bigger and bigger. But
well, and I was going to say, and he commissioned her to do coastal flags in every room that was different from countries all over the world. So like the Greek flag was made out of blue christening ribbons, and and so that is now the draw that really why people still keep going back to that hotel is the art that's there.
Also, like if you design, designers here, like when you design a hotel or a restaurant, you can never be too cool, because what you're designing is hospitality, right? So there's a restaurant in Manhattan called Balthazar, and I always said, like, there's always going to be the chicer, the cooler, but that place, I said this 30 years ago when it opened, like, you would take your family there, you take your grandma there, you would take a date there, and it's timeless, and that place is still as big as it was 30 years ago. And that, when you're designing hospitality, you want to, they want to see stuff, I've never seen that, but you also want to make it comfortable, and you want to make it where people feel an energy, and creating an energy is with music, with art, and not too pretentious, and make it, we have a collective design, I love Ralph Lauren, I like very modern art and stuff, but if you can blend those things, and where everyone just feels like they're happy to be there, you win.
And to Robert's point, when we mentioned the house that wasn't such a success, if we all go over to each other's houses, we may not remember the paint color, right, that we chose. But if you have a certain feeling, you're going to be like, oh my God, it was just like the coolest thing. I can't remember, but you just have that feeling you have. And that's where that particular house felt like a fancy, expensive spec home, you have to be original, and that's where if you go to a cool hotel, or a hotel that stands out in your mind, you feel something. It was something special there, and that's like with Balthazar. It's just timeless and amazing, and year after year, it's the same feeling, Exactly, and it never gets old.
My mother said that's more Paris than Paris.
But I think that is true with designers, to try to give a feeling. That's what stands out to me. I love when kids come over and, they remember, oh my God, and this and that, it's just like, I had so much fun, that matters.
Well, and that house on West Side Highway, like I remember the show where you talked about the plank and you remember the artist.
Richard Woods, he's a British artist.
Yeah, I thought that was so cool.
Well, so we got an opportunity, we bought a one-story garage and we built a 6-story townhouse. But it was it was right across the Hudson River on the West Side Highway. But there's thousands of cars that drive up and down there every day. And we love art, right? So we love art as much as kids. Sometimes art more than good enough to. Anyway, so we were like, oh my God, we get to build this whole house. How cool if we brought art to the exterior of the house, not just art that you hang up on the wall, but it can literally be on your house. And so we commissioned Richard Woods to do art on the front of the house. It's still there to this day. He signed the front door.
That was a cool opportunity because the West Side Highway was blowing up, and Richard Meyer introduced New York City and America to the first glass towers, which is super high. And then Zaha Hadid was doing the building, all the Frank Gehry, all these, were like, wow, and Cortney are doing this building. So we're like, we gotta do something cool. This is our opportunity. So we brought in Richard Woods, and New York Times, one big magazine wrote this amazing. New York Times said something kind of mean or something, I don't remember. But a year later, he did the entire Chanel store, so it kind of validated that it was a good idea. But it was just a cool opportunity in our life to do something cool.
It was just a unique, you have a very unique point of view, and I think it makes people remember it. It makes
Yeah.
Because, you know, we were buying art for our house inside. But to be able to say, well, how am I going to express the exterior? You know, it just, for us, it was another kind of fun moment because the whole, for us, it was more eyeballs.
You wouldn't do that like in suburban or any environment, because I feel like if you build a house in a neighborhood, LA, Charlotte, you have to be respectful of the story of people before, you know. And there on the West Side Highway was like the Wild West, so it gave us the opportunity and we did it. But I do feel like there is a, I hate landmarks because I went through them, but there is a purpose that keep, like you said earlier, like what we do. Charlotte has some of the most beautiful homes I've ever seen, you know. And so I love the fact that that's preserved. And I would never like put an orange home
Yeah.
you know.
Well, every time we start with a new house or a new, whether we're building from the ground up, whether we're taking a gun shop and making it a house, a nightclub making it a house, a parking lot making it a house, we first say, what's the neighborhood like? You know, what is the surrounding? What do we want to do? And to Robert's point, Richard Myers, all these modern people are there. So, you know, we do try to respect what we're, you know, the area and then just bring our nod to it. Our,
Would you ever do another show? Have you been approached to do another show?
We have recently. I'm trying to push Cortney, my daughter, away and in the lead. I don't want to do a show, but we would do it. We were about to do a bunch of press for the book, the morning show, and today's show, and all this stuff. And we were doing Andy Cohen's show, which was the Bravo show. I wrote nice things about him, but you know. But anyway, so they're reaching out to us. But we really don't want to do another show, but it does propel the brand. And so there's, again, going to that point of, and you always want to do, like I pitched Netflix or Amazon, these amazing shows, you know. I don't watch reality television, and I've been on it, and I don't watch much television, but I love Anthony Bourdain. So I pitched this show like 5 times, so I'm like, what's the show? And I'm like, here it is. It's design. It's Anthony Bourdain, but design. Like, what do you mean? Like, well, we would go to Pittsburgh, or we'll go to Cincinnati, and we're going to show you everything that's great about that city, and about design. And it's going to be beautifully shot. And they're like, I don't get it. It's Anthony Bourdain. And so it's very hard in any creative to make an amazing movie, and you know, it's very hard to get something amazing out to the masses, and it's such a pushback. And but that's the show I would love to do.
I was going to share, I'm probably going to give you a little insight. We did a show that was never aired, that just because, again, sometimes, you know, we push the envelope, but it was, I don't know if any of y'all have been able to go to Miami to Art Basel. For us, it was like the first time I'd gone to a Paris flea market and saw like old things I'd seen in magazines and things like that. So it was just very educational. Like, you go to the Mint Museum, you're seeing art and you're just getting inspired. And not everyone gets those opportunities, right? Especially all over this country. I mean, there's people that won't understand art necessarily. And so we said, please let us film at Art Basel so that people watching TV, I mean, for me, living in South Georgia, MTV was like a visual, like, eye candy to me. This is what brought me to say I'm going to New York, and like, I want to see more of the world. I still haven't traveled the whole world yet and plan to, but we wanted to do Art Basel to show people that art is everywhere. You know, photography, painting, you can become an artist. So Robert had 10 design iconic chairs. We commissioned 10 artists to interpret those chairs however they wanted. Did a whole Art Basel charity where we have 50 odd chairs, and then we're commissioning and selling those 10 chairs. They ended up not airing it. It was one of the best shows, but it wasn't relatable enough. And it wasn't relatable enough, I guess, you know, but it was fantastic.
So anyone who loves art or design would be drawn to it. I mean, did you the rights to it?
Yeah, we don't have, but again, you know, anyway, a little bad, you know, bad moment that we weren't able to get all the way out there.
A few quick questions. Dream project.
I was talking about Paris, but
I would say Hotel Paris, but we couldn't do it as well as the Parisians, so we'll just go enjoy it.
Yeah.
They're pretty good.
like if you brought American kind of style to Paris, and flipped it upside down.
I've been doing a lot of research on it. I like, for the elderly, like to create like a boutique lifestyle in a home.
That is so needed.
Yes.
So needed.
Yes.
Dream vacation
Oh,
or sabbatical, like what would you do? Take a sabbatical.
We're not people that like sleep on the, hang out on the beach.
yeah, like we
I
go
love
to
the beach, but
we go to cities, like we still haven't gotten to Morocco, which we've been dying to go. I know. We got to India finally for the first time. There's still so much of the
we
world.
like big cities.
Yeah, we like walking
Do
cities.
you still have your house in Honduras?
Brazil,
yes.
yes.
Advice for someone starting out as an entrepreneur?
Oh, I have some advice.
First step. Take the first step.
In the creative world, I would say we live in a homogenized world. We all see the same things, and we're all so be different. And then you have to have a point of view. And that is what my grandmother and my mother and my dad told me: work hard. Work really hard, outwork everybody. And that's it.
Great advice. Thank you.
Thank you for having
Anything
us.
that we
Holly.
didn't ask you?
I don't think so. What I'm going to have for dinner tonight?
Well, do you have a secret buying trip or a secret flea market, secret something?
I mean, well, we have a house up in the Berkshire, so we've done Brimfield, you're just at Round Top. We were just in Paris, so we of course hit the flea markets there.
If you go to California,
Long
read the book. I love Los Angeles. Cortney doesn't. But I love it for different reasons. But the flea markets, everyone knows about the Rose Bowl thing that there's, which is in Pasadena, but the Long Beach flea market is really good. So hit the Long Beach flea.
Okay. What about questions? You have any questions?
When you walk into a house, what helps you tip the scales to know like what you're going to do, if you're going to purchase it, any kind of insight there?
Well, it's usually in a wreck, so we can afford it. The price tag's good because it's usually nobody else wants it. But there has to be something that's beautiful about it that speaks to us. If it's an old home, we've bought some homes from our current house is from 1826, but it had only had 2 owners. And since we're the 3rd owner, so it was in such despair, but it spoke to us. It was just like, for us to have 7 kids and have space in New York, we started looking at what could be a house. So we bought gun shops, we bought parking lots, we bought nightclubs, because it was just 4 walls and a small enough building that like a big super wealthy developer wouldn't buy it. But it was affordable for us, and we can turn it into a house. But we'd start with one great thing that building had.
So I would tell you, I was really bad at calculus, but I'm really good at arithmetic. It's math in a lot of ways, right? So like what sold that block? What did that cost? So if you're buying a gun shop, what did you pay? What is it going to cost you to build? And what is the math of it? And it's really that. Then you have to ask yourself, like, well, we always bought on the cusp of the next great neighborhood, right? Like, it's hard to go in these great neighborhoods. But we always said, and then you look at the trends, and it used to be, is there a Whole Foods going in there? On and on. And then, and now, like, I would tell you, what cities in America would you find? And I know North Carolina is booming. I don't know enough about, what's going on with Charlotte price, but I would tell you, Detroit, I have a really good feeling about Detroit. Pittsburgh is another city that's still very undervalued. I don't know if I want to live in Detroit further. If I was young, I probably would, because it seems pretty cool. But you have to find, the young are much cooler than us, not young. And so I would see what the trend is going there. And I think the world after COVID changed so much with, you don't have to live in Manhattan, you don't have to live here. But I would tell you, if I was a young person, I have a really good feeling about Detroit. Remember that one? Yeah.
But we would look like, we'd always buy 2 or 3 streets off from like where it was happening, knowing it's going to be happening, pushing, like, is there a great coffee shop? We knew Soho was moving more east, so we started going more east. We kind of got rumor with our very first house. We didn't have children, but we knew we wanted a lot of children. we had a rumor that they were going to build this Chelsea Piers, which is a big sports center in the middle of Manhattan, 2 blocks from where we were buying our Chelsea house. So even though the children weren't there yet, we knew it was going to maybe come. So, you know, you just kind of buy an inexpensive place because you can always bring charm to it. And then just look at what's happening around it, you know. Some places are just never going to come up, you know, depending on like the schools and what's happening. But usually artists know what's happening and that are cool. And then, you know, now there's such a great food scene out there, which matters. And sadly, a lot of shopping, you know, design stores and things like that are closing, but I'm very hopeful that they're going to come back again. It may be new owners, it may look slightly different than what we're used to, but I do think that will happen again.
How do you continue to stay inspired after?
Well, exactly. Well, travel, and you know, I was talking with Holly earlier, you know, if you're on social media or TikTok, we see so much now. You know, it kind of all starts to look the same, or you're feeling like you're missing out on, you know, or you'll never be able to have that. Travel really helps. I'm very stimulated by walking in New York City. Billboards are constantly changing, storefronts are constantly changing. There's real artisan in like storefronts. You know, think of Anthropologie. They do an incredible job at their displays. And so I'm a visual person. Like we were in Montreal, in Melbourne for the first time. We were recently in Montreal, but we were in Melbourne for the first time. We got to Australia for work, and we just hit the ground running, walking, and saw the whole city. We walked all through Mexico City with our kids, dragging them through, because you're just seeing like maybe a food cart looks different. Maybe, you know, the way they're preparing something looks different. Maybe I like the napkin that they're serving it with, you know. When we went and designed a house in Brazil, I remember they brought a bowl, it was a coconut, but it was very shiny and lacquered. And I was like, I need to know how to make that. Take me to the artist that made this. It's not just a rough coconut, it's a shiny lacquered coconut. So just like traveling and getting out, like even if you can't travel overseas or to another state, go to another town, because you're going to see something different. You just are, you know. It's just they don't.
We also have 15-year-olds at home, so we have a lot of young kids. So we're still not. They keep you young, but also they keep us moving, you know. So I think there is something beautiful about you know, we're not there, so you got to keep hustling, you know. And I think that's what keeps it going.
You never want to get stale. You want to just keep, you know, keep in the know. So it's good.
That's the pop-up.
That's the pop-up we had for over a year. So in Los Angeles.
Venice Beach.
Any more questions?
How do you stay organized with 7 children?
Well, I'm a Virgo, so that helps. I am organized, I'd like to say, but definitely, you know, I've loosened up quite a bit. And again, I'm not perfect. I've dropped the ball just like all of us, you know.
We have help.
Yeah.
It takes a village.
It does take a village.
So we have people that help us, and we couldn't do without them.
Yeah, I had a babysitter for 20 years. I had another babysitter that's coming on 20 years who now shifted and became more of like an assistant and a design, you know, kind of helps us in the design world. So, but you know, we lean on a lot of people. You know, the hardest part was when you get the invites. I'm giving you a little bit on motherhood. You get the invite like Max's bowling party, and it would have the last name, and I'd be like, is this Wolfie's friend that's Max, who's 15, or is this Five's friend Max, who's 5? You know, I was like, I would try to read between the lines, like, is it a 10 a.m. bowling party, or is it a, you know, 6 p.m. bowling party? Then I could kind of, and finally sometimes I'd have to reach out and just say, I'm sorry, which Max is this? You know? Exactly.
My question is, how do you incorporate
your design without it being overwhelming to your family. For instance, I'm also a mother, but I'm contending with a child who wants bunk beds and all things camo. So it's hard in our family life. How do you encourage that exploration of design without it being stifling to those around you? Right. And that's a good point. I mean, ultimately we're the parents, right? So you have this say, but you always want to engage your kids to care about their space. I mean, I love design. I grew up with a mom that let me change my room every 2 years. I went to get my first water bed in Atlanta. Like, I am so grateful that she gave me that freedom. But I didn't always make good design choices, for sure. So she would reel me in a little bit and say, it's my home at the end of the day. So we're not doing everything purple, let's say. You can do one wall purple. But you want them to take ownership. You may have a little decorator built right in there, and to this day, my one daughter who loves design, she has very different taste than us. I'm a little funkier and she's a little more conservative. And so she brings ideas now and we go back and forth. But ultimately, there's times where no, you're not putting up every poster on the wall. First of all, we're house flippers, so on any given day, there could be a house showing. But, we always were letting them be involved and engaged. And currently, right now, our 3 boys at home, everything in their room is Novogratz. We said it has to be our product, but you get to choose it and you get to pick it out. So I just having conversations, just letting them care about their space. They may still not clean up after themselves, but they will take pride in their space. But it's okay to say, we're not doing all camouflage, and just say.
I personally like camo.
Military chic, right?
Yeah, I like it.
Yeah. But my other daughter, one of her favorite colors is green. She leaned heavily on the green this time in her apartment. And I was like, it's a lot of green. And she goes, isn't it great?
Just one last question.
So you work together pretty much 24/7, so how does that
Yes,
work?
we do. Yes, we do.
How does that work just from a communication perspective, from a business perspective? How do you make it work?
Well, we definitely, talk a lot in the middle of the night over things that, we're worried about, or, it kind of all blends together. But I will say that if one of us is very passionate about something, we usually support it. Whoever's like, I'm fighting to the bitter end on a yellow fireplace, you're going to have that yellow fireplace, And ultimately, we want the same success. I mean, we're invested. We want, we celebrate our successes and we kind of try not to focus on our failures. And there's been about the same with us over 30-something years. And we don't really try not to place blame on oh, we tried that, it didn't work. But we have the same problems as everybody else, I mean, we have problems with our kids, we have financial problems, we have, like I said, he was like, let's move to LA, and I was like, wait, what? So, but ultimately, we try to, and we've had arguments, our kids have seen us fight, that's the reality. We've had moments where he's like, just get the check, on the job, and I'm like, I think the couple's gonna divorce before the house is done, We've had stressful moments. What you say, whoever really is the most passionate though, usually the other person says, okay, you win this time, because you care that much.
It's not easy, but I think Cortney and I have an interesting dynamic that works, but it's not easy. You really have to be passionate about the person and what you do, because you're with each other a lot. So it's not. We wanted to. I'm still a little upset about it. The title of the book instead of Novogratz Chronicles was supposed to be hard hat optional, which I wanted, and the publisher wouldn't let me call it. But it's not for everybody, but it works for us.
And that's why we have a job. Is some people divorce over renovations or decorating. We actually love it. We actually wanted a lot of kids. I have some friends that are like, I really want the 4th baby. And I'm like, but does he want that? you know,
Cortney earlier said too that the best few, we've done some great stuff and not so great stuff. The few great things we did, we're on the same page. And that's really, and respected the balance of the yin and the yang. And that hasn't always been the case, but the few great things we did. And I think that's good leadership of a non-married team. It's a team, it's supporting each other, it's building each other up. And one thing we've always been pretty good at is when one person's not doing so good, the other one kind of takes the lead. So that's the good stuff that we've done. But it's, I would say it's not probably for everybody, but it's worked for us.
Yeah, and there was like, I mean, we before even like Zoom and online, we would maybe miss some certain jobs because we're working with our kids, you know, they're here, you know, we're with them. So, you know, we knew, okay, that couple's not going to hire us maybe, or that developer, because they need someone that's, you know, maybe doesn't have children, or is maybe a little more professional or whatever. We carved a life, flaw and all, for us, you know, and it's not for everybody, and we've missed some opportunities, but we've gained other opportunities. So even when we did our first reality show, I was pregnant with our 7th child. We got an opportunity, and now it seems crazy because people like post, oh, this didn't happen if I didn't share it. You know, but when we did that, his family, we got an intervention with us and said, please don't do this. And we were like, but you guys also didn't support our very first house or the 3rd house. We're going to do this because we believe in ourselves, you know, and then you have to believe in yourself when it's time to shift and do something else, you know. So we try to focus on our winners and try not to talk too much about our losers.
And one interesting thing is it's both of their perspectives, so one of the talents are whole. So each chapter is kind of each take on how it went down. It's an interesting shift in some of them.
Well, we were fortunate to do our audibles, which we'd never done. He's in one sound booth, I'm in the other sound booth. I didn't realize I started crying and reading my own words, and he's looking through the sound booth going, what in the world's happening?
I know that we could talk all night.
Cortney could.
But thank you for this really engaging conversation. And we can continue it in the museum store. And you can all see the book that's going to contain 29 years of your work together. And I would just want to thank you again, and you, Holly, and Shelley and Adam Landau for making this such a special moment for the Mint and our friends, and the first stop on your book tour. Thank you so much, and see you downstairs.